And welcome to Trava Security's first cybersecurity awareness for today's SaaS companies. We're grateful for those of you in attendance in person today and also for those of you that are joining us virtually. We're excited about this event. You know, as I was thinking about what the purpose of the event is, two words came to mind, and those two words are enlighten and frighten. We hope to enlighten you, but hopefully we don't frighten you, or at least not frighten you too much. You know, a little bit of fright might be exactly what's needed in order to force us into action, and that's really what today is all about, to give you actionable information that hopefully you can move forward with your cyber risk management, your cybersecurity program for your company. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. We'd like this to be very interactive, so please just raise your hand if you have a question. For those of you that are virtual, we have a way for you to get those to us, and we'll get those answered as well. If there's a question in the audience, I will repeat that question so those online can hear it clearly. We do have some short breaks scheduled throughout the afternoon, but let's keep it casual. For those of you that are here in person, please feel free to get up and get yourself a drink or take a break if you need one. The restrooms are past the elevators again and back to the right. We are recording this event, and we will send it to everybody who's registered both in person and virtually. And then for those of you in person, please plan to stay for the meet and greet on the Sky Deck. It's a beautiful day here in Indianapolis. So I know those of you on the East Coast are suffering with a monsoon, but we have beautiful weather here today in Indianapolis. So please stick around afterwards for our meet and greet. And with that, let me see if I can get my clicker working here. This is a little bit about me. My name is Jim Goldman. I'm CEO and co-founder of Trava Security. You'll meet a lot of the rest of our leadership team here as the afternoon goes along. I've had what I would call an interesting career that brought me to this point. I am originally from New England, but I moved out here 30 years ago when I took a professorship at Purdue, where I started the network engineering degree program. To keep a long story short, had some very interesting experience with the FBI. As I like to say, I was everyone's worst nightmare, cyber nerd with a gun. And then I went to work for ExactTarget, an awesome Indianapolis success story where I was their first vice president of information security. We were subsequently acquired by Salesforce, became the Salesforce Marketing Cloud. I was with Salesforce until December 2019. And then shortly thereafter, in February of 2020, we started talking about this idea of the need to combine cyber risk management and cyber insurance in one comprehensive offering specifically targeted to small and medium-sized businesses. That concept eventually became Trava, and here we are today. So enough about me. Here's our agenda for today. I'll be doing some of the introductory remarks about just setting some background, some context about cyber risk management, cybersecurity, compliance, cyber insurance, just kind of getting some of the vocabulary and the initial concepts out of the way. We'll then take a short break, and then we'll see a demo of our product by Rob Beeler, my co-founder and CTO, along with Josh Hurst, who's our distinguished software architect. Then take another break, and we'll have a very interesting panel discussion with a customer of ours in Camp. Ben Jacobs, who's Vice President of Engineering of Encamp, will join us, as well as Cody Rivers, who is with a partner of ours named AIS, who's a managed service provider headquartered here in Indianapolis. We'll then take another short break, and we'll wrap the afternoon up with a fireside chat about cyber insurance, which you don't want to miss. And then that'll be followed with, as I said, our program wrap-up. We'll have some time for questions, and then we'll have our reception outside. Did I miss anything, Ashley? No? Okay, so far? Okay. So, yeah, there's that guy again. All right. So, let's get started. All right. For context, what these statistics say is that the majority of small and medium-sized businesses have either been victimized by a cyber attack or live in fear of one. And yet, this statistic isn't up there, the majority of those same small and medium-sized businesses are either uninsured or underinsured when it comes to cyber insurance. That seems like kind of a dichotomy, doesn't it? It's like, why would that be? And that's really kind of the underlying motivation for Trava and for this cybersecurity awareness seminar. We want to kind of dig into that and help expose what that's all about. And here's the motivation, as we say down here. Increasingly, these small and medium-sized businesses, customers, vendors, and business partners are withholding business until that cyber risk is under control. So, things like, well, you must have $10 million in cyber liability insurance. You must have this certification. You must have that certification. You must successfully fill out this security questionnaire. It becomes kind of what we say table stakes for doing business with a lot of customers in a variety of different industries. So those are the easy for me to say, statistics, but what have we seen when we talk to our customers? Here's some of the things we've heard. A lot of our customers say things like, I don't even know what I don't know. It's almost like they don't want to know, because if they know, then they feel like they're forced to do something about it. There's a lot of misunderstanding about, as I mentioned before, about the differences between compliance and security, and I don't understand cyber risk management. How does all this come into it? So what do they do? Who do they turn to? What you have to understand is that the business owners, and we'll talk to some later today, the business owners of these small and medium-sized businesses, their expertise is in some field other than IT or cybersecurity. That's not what they're experts in. That's not the business they're in. And it's almost like this is a specialized field. So when they look for help, they turn to managed service providers, managed security service providers. One of the problems there is there's a wide spectrum. That's a broad label that covers a whole lot of range of abilities and services that they offer. It is not an easy road to negotiate for these business owners. And as a result, what they often do is they often say, well, maybe I should just buy some security tools. Maybe I should buy some cybersecurity tools. I saw this advertised on TV, or I was on a airline flight and I saw this tool advertised in an airline magazine. But the problem is the cybersecurity tool landscape is very crowded. And you might say, well, just how crowded is it, Jim? Whoops. And it's very crowded. It's very, very crowded, right? So how is someone, your average business owner, who doesn't understand, this isn't their area of expertise, doesn't understand cybersecurity all that well, how are they supposed to choose from among all these tools, all these different categories? How are they supposed to know which particular grouping of which tools is going to protect them properly? It's clearly an impossible task. So there's got to be a better way. It's almost like we've jumped immediately to the solution without understanding the problem. And this is really where the notion for Trava came about. It's like, don't jump immediately to cybersecurity solutions. Take a step back. Let's talk about cyber risk management. And that's really what we're about. So here's a reality check. And if you remember nothing else from today, I hope you'll take this away. And that's that a random collection of cybersecurity tools does not a cybersecurity program make. That's so important, I'm going to say it again. A random collection of cybersecurity tools does not a cybersecurity program make. Cyber risk management has to come first. You have to understand what are the problems that are particular to your particular organization. Don't go looking for a solution until you fully understand the problem. The problem definition portion of cybersecurity is called cyber risk management. Now, here's the thing. I say something like cyber risk management, and people, start breaking out in a cold sweat because it sounds like terribly complicated and it would be way over their heads and technical and so forth and so on. That's not the case. What I'd like you to do is, as I talk about this, picture that the business you're in is you own a jewelry store, all right? Never mind anything about cybersecurity. And we're going to do a risk management exercise, a risk assessment and a risk management exercise for a jewelry store, okay? So your assets. What are you trying to protect from loss? All right? Instead of data, which is, what the cybersecurity, cyber risk management would be focused on, you're trying to protect these precious jewelry items that you're trying to sell, right? What's your threat? Who would like to steal or destroy your assets, how, or even why, all right? So the criminals are obviously going to try to steal the jewelry that you store in the cases, all right? Or in this case, the cyber criminals are going to try to steal the data, probably your customers' data, right? And hold you for ransom. And what are your vulnerabilities? Where are your vectors? Literally unlocked doors, right? So think about if you own a jewelry store. What do jewelry stores these days do? They have guards at the doors. The doors aren't even necessarily unlocked during the day, all right? The jewelry's all locked up in cases. What do they do with the jewelry at night? Do they leave it out in the case? Do they leave it in the window displays? No. What have they learned over the years? Take the jewelry out of the case, put it in the big safe in the back, upstairs, downstairs, whatever. They have taken steps, right? What have they determined the risk. They figured out what was the likelihood, or sometimes called the probability, and the impact. They prioritized their risks, and then they took steps to mitigate that risk. So taking the jewelry out of the case at night and putting it in the safe, that's a risk mitigation technique. That's all we're talking about in cybersecurity as well. You have all of this data that you're trying to protect. It's your crown jewels, right? Your data is your crown jewels. You're trying to protect your data. So what do you do with it? What kind of protective mechanisms can you wrap around that data? What kind of process steps? Remember, it's all people, process, and technology. Technology in and of itself is never the answer. Now, back to the jewelry store example. You can only do so many things yourself, right? You can only take so many protective measures yourself. So what does that jewelry store owner do after they've done everything they can? They buy insurance, all right? So what should we do after we've done everything we can do to protect our data, to protect our crown jewels? We should buy cyber insurance, right? That's the final piece. It's not this extra thing out there, unrelated, all right? It is an integral part of the solution. Cyber insurance is just as important as any other risk mitigation technique that you would take along the way. Risk assessment, so you understand where the problems are, where the liabilities are, where the vulnerabilities are, all right? It's risk mitigation, which is putting together the plan to start to bring that level of risk down in an organized fashion. And then finally, it's risk transfer, to take that residual risk and transfer it to cyber insurance. All three are equally important. And that's where Trava comes in. That's what Trava is all about. Trava offers risk assessment via our software platform for risk and vulnerability assessment. We offer the risk mitigation versus our vCISO insights. So we help you move from where you are to where you need to be. And then finally, we offer risk transfer through cyber insurance. So not a sales presentation, that's my only slide about Trava, I promise. But that is what comprehensive cyber risk management looks like. Risk assessment, risk mitigation, risk transfer. And I got on a roll. I didn't see if there were any questions, but questions?
We had a question come in virtually, Jim. What is the biggest obstacle that small and medium-sized businesses use for not investing in cyber preparedness?
The biggest obstacle that they face in not investing. I, I almost feel like it's, this is going to sound funny, I feel like it's negative inertia is the best example that I can give you, or the best way I can describe it. It's like they've gotten this far with doing nothing, and so it's difficult for them to take that first step, or they don't know how to take that first step. They don't know who to talk to. They don't know what the first question to ask is. It's like trying to do anything brand new that we haven't done before. You know, unless you take that first step towards it, you know, that first step is always the most difficult. I really feel like that's it. In talking to the business owners I've talked to, once we start the conversation, it's like you can see the anxiety level go down. It's like, oh, this isn't that difficult after all. Oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. Yes. Oh, I can see how that would be a good thing. I can see how that, you know, might help us, that type of thing. But it's just, you know, it's recognizing you have a problem, right? Accepting the fact that it's a problem, and then being willing to do something about that problem.
We had another question come in.
Great.
Okay.
Happy to hear it.
How do you see cyber risks increasing in the future?
How do I see cyber risk increasing? Facetiously, I would say on a daily basis. But that's actually not so facetious. You know, as I showed on my bio slide, I spent 5 years with the FBI Cybercrime Task Force, and that was a very enlightening experience, because what I realized was cyber criminals are no different than any other type of criminal, in that they're basically lazy, which is why they're criminals and they don't have legitimate jobs. But make no mistake about it, they're also very technically astute. In fact, they're some of the most brilliant people I've ever encountered. They just happen to be on the wrong side of the law. All right? As a result, make no mistake about it, these are not loner individuals living in their mom's basement somewhere in Romania. This is a large, organized, multi-tiered economy with specialized skills serving each other. Take ransomware, for example. You may think ransomware, again, is, you know, one person, you know, sending out some harmful script to one company. Not so. Ransomware is an entire economy. There is a layer of the industry that writes the ransomware script. There is a layer of the economy that sells that. There are service clouds for ransomware. There are end user license agreements. There are support organizations. There are payment processing systems for ransomware. There are ransomware payment negotiation levels of service providers. It's one layer after another. This is an entire shadow economy, folks. It is very well organized. I think sometimes we, as legitimate business people, underestimate the sophistication of the cybercrime community. I really do. Other questions? Right. Okay, so the question was, so there are obviously these large criminal ecosystems and state, nation-state actors targeting larger entities, but you know, what's the nature of the threat towards these smaller businesses? So it's sort of a twofold question. When it comes to ransomware, the sad truth is that a small or medium-sized business is just as likely to be attacked as a large company. As a matter of fact, in some cases, remember I told you that cyber criminals are basically lazy, right? In some cases, it's easier for them to attack a small or medium-sized business than it is to be a large enterprise, and here's why. If the small or medium-sized business has a lack of defense to start with, what will happen is the ransomware criminal will get in first in what we call a stealth mode, will steal as many documents as they can. If they can steal the copy of the cyber insurance policy, if they have one, they'll find out what the aggregate coverage limit is for that company. They'll then launch the ransomware attack, and they'll ask the maximum of the coverage limit that they know that company is covered for. So in that case, it's just as likely that a small or medium-sized business would be attacked than another one. Another thing about another target, if you will, for small and medium-sized businesses is just because your revenue is not in the billions does not mean that you don't have something that a cyber criminal organization would be interested in. You may be a tier 3 or tier 4 provider for the Department of Defense. You know, here in the Midwest, there's a lot of small manufacturing companies, that kind of thing. You may think you're only making nuts and bolts, but the fact of the matter, that nut or bolt eventually ends up in a battleship or something like that. There are criminal organizations that are very interested in that information and are very, very likely to attack that company, even though it's relatively small. So I think the two, to boil it down, it's the intelligence for the value of the data itself, and then the ransomware, you know, the ability just for the financial gain. Any more? Yes. That's exactly right. For those of you online, the question was, you know, we don't hear about armed robberies of jewelry store that much anymore because certain controls have been put in place, risk mitigations have been put in place. So the question is, do we see that same type of progress being made in the cybersecurity of the cyber risk management world? Absolutely. I think the problem is that people don't necessarily feel empowered, or they don't see that day that things could get better. They think, you know, they're too willing to accept the status quo, and the status quo is simply not acceptable. They're unwilling to make the investments. You know, I was thinking of two possible analogies. Jewelry store was one. Another was fire insurance. If you think about, you know, just building insurance and that kind of thing, why did fire insurance come along? Why did building codes come along? Because of things like the Great Chicago Fire, right? And it was like, eventually we got sick of having our buildings burned down constantly. And so what did we do? We put in specifications. We put in building codes. We put in requirements. We started selling fire insurance, et cetera. This is no different. We have to put in minimum codes, right? That everybody has to agree this is a good thing, all right? We all have to meet this requirement, and there'll be insurance that will be available for those unforeseen circumstances when we did everything right and still something went wrong, right? But it can't be the way it is now where, and this is, we're going to talk about this in the insurance panel a little bit later on. You don't want to miss it, but one of the problems is you've got companies now that let's just say have a less than stellar cybersecurity program and are putting in claims for cyber insurance. So there's a big debate if that company kind of didn't get exactly what they deserved, right? So should the cyber insurance even be paying a claim in that case? It's a huge debate right now. I don't know how we're doing for time, by the way.
We're doing okay, and we have another question that came in from the virtual audience. So speaking of, you had mentioned earlier about security requirements being mandated by customers,
Right.
potential customers. You mentioned it here again. The question is, what changes do you foresee in security requirements in 2022, perhaps maybe from the government or at the federal level?
It's a really good question, and it's like, how do I want to say this? People seem to object to the government, and I don't just mean the U.S. government, any government, a worldwide organization. The World Economic Forum is trying to pass cybersecurity standards. People seem to object to that, right? They object to, regulations, and yet at the same time, they're not necessarily stepping up on their own to doing it, and there aren't necessarily industry standards. One of the most interesting examples of this that we could throw out is the payment card industry took it upon themselves to come up with security standards because they didn't want the government, any government, coming in and telling them how to secure their business. And so the payment card industry came up with the PCI standard. Many people don't know that, that's not a government mandated standard. It's an industry developed standard. So to your point, what do I see happening in 2022? On the more government side, the places like the United States Department of Defense are getting real strict about what are called CMMC security standards. So even as I mentioned before, if you're a tier 3 or tier 4 manufacturer, provider for the Department of Defense, you will have to be CMMC certified to some level or another here very shortly. What's also going to happen is, I think in our space, in the software as a service or the SaaS industry, you're going to see more and more expectations of what's called SOC 2 or ISO 27001 certification. There's only two motivations for investing in a security program. I shouldn't say only two, but there's two primary ones. One is you have a business motivation, and the other is you have a regulatory obligation. So either there's a key contract that you want to get, a big, breakthrough customer, and they're saying you need to meet this standard, or it's a government regulation saying because of the business in, you must meet this standard. I do see increasing regulations, increasing requirements, increasing mandatory standards. But at the end of the day, I do think it's still going to be up to the individual business owner whether they choose to invest or not. We good? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. All right. 5-minute break. How about that? Okay. Welcome back, everyone. And we'll move on with our program here. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce my co-founder and Chief Technology Officer of Trava, Rob Beeler, and he will host this next portion where we'll see what I think are some pretty darn exciting product features.
Great, thanks, Jim, and thanks everybody for being here. Appreciate you spending the time with us today. So, my name is Rob Beeler. As Jim mentioned, a lot of years in the software industry, and was really fortunate to be paired up with Jim and his security expertise to bring Trava to market and bring our solution to bear. So we're excited to show that to you. So Jim talked a lot about kind of the what we need to think about from a cybersecurity perspective, and really the first problem most companies face is understanding where they stand. Where are they in terms of their security posture? And if you understand that, then you can really focus your efforts on filling the gaps and knowing where to start. And I do think it's true that many companies kind of freeze up and say, I don't even want to know because I don't know how I can tackle these problems. It's too big. But it's really critical as a first step to understand what is, where's my security posture today? So we're gonna talk a little bit about that, about how we try to solve that problem. We've spent a lot of time at Trava building a platform that really helps you automate and simplify measuring your security posture. And we're going to show you that in just a minute. A couple of things I would point out that I think are really critical when you're trying to understand your security posture and assessing is risk and threats and vulnerabilities come from many different angles. And so you have to take a really broad view of your posture. You can't look at just one factor and say, okay, I'm good there, so I'm safe. You really have to look across the spectrum of threats to understand where you are. And that's really what we've tried to build into our product. So from an assessment perspective, we look at things in three ways. We're going to look at first off, we're going to look at your vulnerabilities. We're going to go out and measure for known vulnerabilities and search for those in your environment. And we've got some really industry-leading tools that we use to measure that and to assess your posture from a vulnerability standpoint. The second area we're going to look at is your overall cyber risk or your cyber maturity. So we use industry security frameworks like NIST and CIS to assess your maturity as a company. And then finally, we're going to look at your social engineering attack footprint through phishing simulation. So with that, I'm going to introduce Josh here. Josh is our software architect. He's been with us from day one, helping us build our software. And he's got a lot of experience helping building companies. He was actually recently named a TechPoint Tech 25 honoree. So he's going to take you through our product and show you how we assess maturity. So take it away, Josh.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Just going to switch over here. Afternoon, everybody. What you're looking at on my screen here is our software platform. So when you first sign in, you hit the dashboard and you see three gauges that hit on the three aspects that Rob touched on. On the left, you have your surveys that measure your controls around your policies. So are you running your business in a way that's safe and secure? In the middle, you have a quick view here, a gauge that shows you your technical vulnerabilities. So at a quick glance, you can see what are the aspects that a hacker could use to exploit your system. And then finally, on the right, you have another gauge that shows you really how your staff, how your employees respond to phishing attacks. So I'm going to dive into that a little bit deeper, but at a high level, when you sign in, you get to see kind of a high level gauge of where your company is at. So to start with, we'll look at technical vulnerabilities. So again, you have a high level gauge. You can see at a glance where you're at, whether you have work to do or whether things are in good shape. On the right-hand side, you have a trend line. So over time, you can see, are you getting better? Are you getting worse? And then if I scroll down a little bit, you can see results of past vulnerability assessments that we've run. And there are a lot of different options that we can turn on that I'm gonna dive in a little bit. But at a high level, we want to kind of keep it simple to see where you're at any given moment and also over time. So if I start up a new assessment, we have a number of different types of scans that we can run. So we have external scans and certificate scans that really look at the perimeter of your resources. So your servers, your certificates, are they ready to expire? Are they vulnerable to different technical attacks? So those are good ones to start with. Next layer deeper, though, is a dark web scan, and that actually goes out to the dark web based off of a domain, and it crawls and walks through different results to see if you have emails that have been hacked, if you're more susceptible to social engineering. So that's a good one to pair with the phishing campaigns that I'll talk about in a minute. Next would be a cloud scan. So whether you have infrastructure or servers running in AWS, Google, or Azure, you do an authenticated scan. So it actually goes into your environment kind of from the inside and looks around to make sure that you have it configured correctly. You don't have buckets that are sitting exposed, or your customer's data isn't accessible. And then agent scans. This is where you would actually install a piece of software on your employees' computers, and it will send back telemetry data to say what kind of applications they have installed on their devices that are susceptible to different attacks. So then if we keep going down here, we have web application scans. So this is where maybe you're a SaaS company like we are, and you have an application that your users sign into. You'd actually aim this scan at your application, give it credentials, and it's going to similarly go inside your app and do more of a dynamic application security test. And then finally, the M365 scan. So if you leverage Microsoft 365, you want to make sure that it's configured correctly. And if you don't have it configured correctly, a lot of times it's hard to tell. You just don't know what you have out there. Similarly to what Jim was saying earlier. So with this scan, you'd aim it at your infrastructure, and it would make sure that you don't have like a SharePoint site that's available and accessible. And we're always trying to find new ways to help our customers secure their systems. So we have a few additional scans that we can run, such as a WordPress scan or an internal scan. So we would actually put a device, a scanning appliance inside a network and do the scan that way. So with all these, though, we can schedule them. We can set up monthly, daily, weekly scans. So you probably don't want to run all of these on the same schedule. Some of them you want to run more frequently. Some of them you want to run less frequently. It kind of depends on your organization and how quickly you can respond to the findings. But it's pretty simple to get a scan started, and that was really our goal from day one, was to make it easy to use these tools. Like Jim's slide earlier, there are a number of tools, and pulling them all together takes a ton of work. So I'm going to kick that one off. Again, pretty simple to get started. And I'm going to dive into one that we had running earlier today. So when you go into an assessment that's finished, you can see at a high level, what are the types of scans that I've run? And then we rank them by risk. So where should I focus my energy? At a high level, we show in the middle sort of a boiled down score that shows you overall where your risk is at. And then across all the different scan types by severity, we show you, do you have a lot of critical findings, or is it mostly informational? And that's great. That's all fine and well, but you need really to know what the vulnerabilities are to know how to fix them. And that's also what we tried to do. So if I open up one of these, we have a high level description of what the issue is. We also link to industry standard sources. So in this case, this links to a CVE in MITRE's database, so we can link off to that. We have an impact description, so we know if we don't fix this, what is potential to happen. And then the nitty gritty. So if you're actually going to go in and fix these issues, you'd come down to the solution and follow some of these steps. This one's pretty big, so we'll take a look at another one here as well. So let's say I wanted to look at just our certificate. We can filter, sort, search, and we can see that we have a certificate vulnerability and some pretty clear description on what I need to go do to fix this. So with all these, we can generate reports. We can get information out of the system, whether it's a CSV or whether it's kind of a nice PDF that you can share with your executive team. But at a high level, what we wanted to really build with our platform from a assessment standpoint is to make it easy to turn different scans on and off, easy to run, easy to manage. Okay, so I'm going to switch here now to our surveys.
Josh, can I interrupt you with a question that's come in?
Yeah.
I'm here over here.
I had to find the voice. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a way to schedule the scans? And would someone know how often they should run certain scans versus others? Or is it manual where you say, okay, once a week we're going to do this, but you manually have to do it? One of the questions that came in.
Good question. You can run them manually, certainly, but we'd recommend some of the ones that you want to just have running in the background and always have new information about to come down to the bottom and set up a schedule. So it'd be as simple as just turning the ones on or off that you want to schedule, and then setting like a cadence here. So whether it's every day, every week, every month, definitely would recommend you schedule those so you don't have to think about it. As far as how often to run the different kinds of scans, I'd say at a minimum across all of them that apply every month, but a lot of them I would run more often than that. You can run them as often as you want. That's one thing that we wanted to make a priority when we built the platform, is to not kind of harm you or slow you down. If you wanted to run it more often, use it more often. So you're not limited as far as that goes. But dark web scan is a good one to try to run every week, even more often. This one takes a couple of hours to complete, but you really want to know as soon as someone's email gets compromised that they need to change their password, or maybe you need to do some phishing simulation training with them to make them a bit better.
We had one more comment that came through, kind of a comment question talking about all the red. And is that what Jim was referring to in the beginning about being scared?
All the what?
All the red rather than green on the risk score.
Yeah, if I saw the score, I would take some action for sure. But I mean, this trend line going back to August, if this was my company, I would say we're not getting better. We need to either invest more or try harder. I'm not really sure. What would you add to that?
This environment that we're showing in this demo is actually what we call our purposely vulnerable environment. We designed, we built this so we could detect a lot of issues and show them. We also like to refer to it as the environment that would get the IT guy fired. If you have 624 vulnerabilities and that many critical and high, yeah, it's probably time for a new line of work.
Any other questions?
Josh, will you guys talk a little bit about the scoring methodology and how that, what is the red indicating here?
You want to take that one?
Sure.
We've
So
gone through a lot of iterations
The
on it.
question was about the scoring methodology and what the red means. Yeah, so we have built a scoring algorithm. I mean, one of the things that kind of drives our company is we have a lot of security expertise with Jim and his team and others on our security experts. And they really help us derive this algorithm, looking at the number of issues we find across an environment and the severity of those. And then we actually roll those up. We go in and we normalize all that data across all those scans. We get data from a lot of different tools. They don't all necessarily match up. So our first step is to normalize it. Then we classify every issue based on, we have a 15-factor algorithm to say, here's the severity of this issue. And that's based on industry standards as well. Then we take those scores and we roll them up with a weighted average that we developed, both at the scan level and then rolling up across your entire assessment. So, and really, so this is a risk score. So you want a low score that goes from 0 to 5. And you can kind of see, we've tried to indicate where you want to be. I mean, you want to be in the low to medium range. And this gauge turns red as you go higher. It'll be green if you're low. And you really want to stay out of the high and critical. And a lot of our customers will go in and use the filtering to say, okay, I want to look at the issues that you've returned that are critical, and then the ones that are high, and they use that to kind of prioritize where they focus their efforts.
Yeah, so you can go in and filter based off of what's the most urgent thing that you need to fix. Great. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to press on to the survey section. So again, you're going to see once you hit the survey page, a high level where you at, kind of a stoplight, and then trend over time. If I just start a new survey, we have focused more on start with these two surveys. One based off of NIST, so National Institute of Standards and Technology, their CSF. It's based on that. It's our take on it, but that is one that we have used a lot. And then very recently, we've added CIS's V8, so it's Center for Internet Security, and it covers their security controls. So that's the one I'm going to walk you through right now. We try to make this really easy to get through. You've got 5 controls, five sections, if you will, that the questions are going to cover. And then if I complete a few of these, I'll skip ahead and I'll show you some results in a second. So do you actively manage all of your enterprise assets to include user devices? Say we do some of that, and we push the user on to the next question. Do you have a process in place to ensure unauthorized assets or denied access to your network? So again, I would read through this. I would kind of figure out which section I fall in. We're not doing this at all. We'll say that. And then the last one here that I'll read through with you. Do you have a detailed and current inventory listing of all your software? So this is kind of starting to get into the software assets. We'll say we do this, but it's ad hoc. So user would keep going through this. They would complete the different controls, and they would get a score at the end. The score isn't super actionable. So one thing that we show, if I click into some results here, would be ranked by risk where they should focus. So if they were really poor in one aspect, in this case, it'd be data recovery. That's probably the weakest control. We give them specific things that they can go do to get better at that. So again, here was the question. Here's how we answered this. And then here's a starting point. So in this case, we should set up a data recovery process and make sure that the scope of the data recovery activities is prioritized. And yeah. So again, you can kind of read through a few of these, but it's important to show them kind of what are the next steps. And with this as well, you can export it, you can download a CSV, you can download a report. So to get information out of our platform, it's pretty easy as well. Rob, what would you add as far as surveys go? Because this is where a lot of companies start.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. This is, it's actually very useful for a lot of our customers, especially smaller customers, and they don't know where to start, right? And so one of the things we're trying to do here is number one, not reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of good industry frameworks, and in fact, many customers say, look, I really want to follow an industry framework, or I need to for a regulatory reason or a contractual reason. So we try to follow those frameworks and then help them focus, right? And we think of it as if you're not doing any of these things, you got to start somewhere. Where do you start? What are the most important things? And so in a similar way with vulnerability, we worked with the security team to define what are the highest impact items, right? And what is the risk associated with any one of these items? So if we calculate risk by looking at the impact of that issue if you don't do it, times the likelihood that it'll occur, right? So the less mature you are, the higher the likelihood you'll have a particular issue. We use that to calculate this risk that can help prioritize where you spend your effort.
Great. Yeah, any questions on surveys before I move on to phishing?
Are there plans to put other surveys into the platform?
So
Yes.
the question was, are there plans for other surveys? And yes, there are. So we have a number of surveys queued up. One of the things we did first was build an infrastructure where we can easily add in new surveys. So we're looking at one related to SOC, CMMC, actually a broader NIST survey as well. There's also in a number of states, there are specific state regulations that require companies or like federal entities or state entities, school systems to adhere to a certain framework. And so we're working with partners to implement those. We have a number of those queued up. You'll see that list grow over the coming months.
All right, I'm going to press ahead to phishing. So we've covered the technical vulnerabilities. We've looked at your policies and how you're kind of running your business, but how are your employees, is your staff responding to attacks? So this is a really simple, easy to use system where you can start campaigns, you can measure the progress that your staff has. So at a high level, when you hit this page again, you see kind of a stoplight gauge where in this case, we're not doing too well here, but over time, you'd see different results here in trends. So if I start another one, we have 3 options today. We're not trying to overwhelm with too many options, but to get started, we wanted to focus on a pretty believable ADP, Google, or Microsoft email. So if I pick one of these, actually get to pick by employee or even by department, so I can try to fish the engineering department and see how they they respond. And then this as well, if I select somebody, you can schedule it. So you can set it to run every quarter. You could say every month I want the finance team to get the ADP phishing campaign email because they're more susceptible to kind of fall to that. So then if I go back and check out some results of one that has finished, it'll look pretty similar. The data is different, but we can see that we sent 4 emails, half of the people actually clicked it, 3 of them opened it, and we can track that as well as how many have reported the email. So the best outcome is that that they get it and actually report it. They open it and report it, or just report the email. But worst outcome is if they click it and submit data. So, and again, you can download and export information if you're trying to put this into kind of an executive report. Yeah. Yeah, the question was if the users that are getting these emails are flagging them and marking them as spam, how are they making it through to actually test them? So that's one of the aspects that we built in is as an administrator, somebody going in and running these, you have the capability to set up or to send a test email and actually whitelist IPs. So that's how we make sure that we can get through. That's a good question. Yeah. Would you add anything to the phishing
What I would
aspects?
add here is that, if you look at the current state of attacks, I don't know the exact number. I think it's over 80% of attacks come through social engineering, come through phishing attempts. So this is really, this is the way that it's kind of the cheap way for attackers to get through, right? There's ransomware as a service out there. You can pay somebody to send X number of emails for you until they get through and phish somebody, which is quite a bit easier than trying to figure out, how do I get their password and how do I get in here? You just send them something and get them to click on a link. So this is obviously a very critical piece. How are your people trained to identify and handle these messages properly? And so we felt this was critically important to have in the product for a couple of reasons. One, so you can measure that, but then also you can integrate that in with your overall posture, right? To be able to compare that, not only look at how secure is your environment and what's your maturity from a process standpoint, but how are your people actually responding? And then the last thing we've done is if someone is phished, we do send them to a site where we're going to provide some pretty rudimentary training in terms of how to identify and avoid being phished. But this is a great, you can use this for your customers or your employees as a good indicator of where additional training is needed. So there's other training options out there you can use to help improve your customer or your employees' response to this.
Rod, there's a question that came in. What typically happens if somebody opens up an email and they've been phished? Do they know right away, like the big scary picture shows up on their computer, the company shuts down, or is it possible they don't know? Or at what point do you know? And like, describe what happens.
Yeah, that's a really good question because, well, if you get phished by our simulator and you click on it, you get a nice picture of a cat, and it's going to give you a video and tell you not to do that again. But if it's a real attacker, the reality is many times they're going to they're going to maybe collect data from you that they're going to use a later time. They're going to get into your system and wait for the opportune time. There's plenty of stories of an attacker getting in a system, compromising your email, watching within a financial institute or a VC saying, oh, look, this deal's getting ready to go down. We're going to have there's a transaction happening. Oh, let's send an email right now to ask for money. Hey, we need this money transferred. Go ahead and transfer it now. So often you won't know, and they'll use that information for a later attack that could be more damaging. So you might have been infiltrated months or years ago and wouldn't know about it.
Do we know of any current or new phishing scams that are going on that people could pay attention for?
Maybe we'll ask Jim, or if there's any new phishing attacks that you've heard of recently.
So the irony is actually people sometimes become complacent about phishing because it's like, well, that's not new. You know, phishing's been going on forever. Do we really have to worry about that anymore? And the answer is yes, absolutely. So I think that the phishing has become more sophisticated. They're always looking for more targeted subject matter, associations, etc. So because it's all about likelihood to get you to click. So what's happened is phishing has become more sophisticated, become more personalized because there's better and better information gathering.
Or even through other tools like Slack. There's a story, I think it was Electronic Arts, like a big game developer that had their source code compromised because someone went into Slack and asked to have their account escalated to some higher tier, and it wasn't who they claimed to be, and they got access to the source code and are actually trying to sell the source code. So it's not just email, but email is a kind of the beachhead.
Right. Yeah. With SMS phishing, and you mentioned the Slack. There's reports of many tens of thousands of Slack webhooks out in GitHub where people can go in and get a webhook where you can post messages in somebody's Slack channel unauthorized. So there's many vectors for that attack, and they'll grow.
Yeah, it's not really a negative impact. It's probably something to be aware of. The worst thing somebody could do is if they click the link and then submit information after that. So it doesn't affect the score negatively.
It's maybe a little more informational, so you can look and see, are people opening the emails, and of the people who opened them, who clicked them.
Yeah, yeah. The question, if you're watching in virtually, was around if from phishing, when we're kind of scoring it, if opening it is a negative tally on their score, it's really just opening, or it's just submitting information or clicking the link.
Maybe a follow-up to that, Rob. So if people do open the messages, are there things they can be looking for to not get caught by a phishing attack?
Yeah, and that's
Protect yourself from that.
yeah. So the question is, are there people are opening, what are signs that this is a phishing attack, and what should they be doing? And that's one of the things that we cover in the training that we link someone to if they do click on that. The obvious things are misspellings. I mean, the first thing is always checking where the email is coming from, and it'll often look like it's somewhere else, but clicking through to really see the address and look for, different names. Generally, somebody asking you to click through on a message that you're not expecting it's a good thing to avoid. But there's a number of steps that we provide in our training, and there's a lot of training out there as well to help improve people's behavior.
All right. So the last thing I wanted to show real quick, so you can kind of see where you're at from a cyber risk management standpoint. And in our platform, you can also get insurance. So I won't go into too much detail here, but coming very soon, you'll be able to click through, actually get a quote, and secure cybersecurity insurance. So any high level questions or anything that anybody wanted to ask?
There's a general question that came in. I think this would be for you guys. what particular security considerations are there for serverless computing, such as AWS, and how do they differ from traditional application security?
I'll jump in.
I'm noodling that.
While he noodles, I guess I'll blurt out my answer. I won't think about it. Yeah, there is certainly, and this is a huge class of users. It's a growing class of people who are not, they don't have maybe dedicated infrastructure, and really, there's a couple things that you need to look at. One is in your cloud environment, how is that environment configured? So are you, let's say, rotating your service accounts, and are you using MFA for your root users, and do you have your firewall rules set up properly? There's a number of things that you have to look at. Now, we actually go detect those things through our cloud scan. So we can run a cloud scan and look through your cloud environment and find configurations that can cause an issue, that could expose you from a security perspective. We find a lot of people go to the cloud, they go quickly because they can. It's easy to go to the cloud, but they don't really understand the security implications. There's kind of this feeling that, oh, I'm in the cloud, I'm secure. Amazon's really secure. They got guards at the door and you can't get in, and they're really smart, which is all very true. But you can configure in a way that will expose things. The second area, and this is an area that we're, we use this technology as well, but is looking at the actual containers that you use to deploy those serverless systems, and so that's an area where we're studying different tools on how we can help people scan images, scan their AWS environments, their clusters, Kubernetes, et cetera. In these cloud environments, it's typically the technology you're going to use. So that's kind of the direction we're moving to. How do we help secure that as well?
Yeah, I would add the container scanning is a good start, but you've got to take it all the way to where the container is going to run and actually measure it from the inside to make sure that it's secure. It's easy to kind of, and this is some of the sophistication that we're hearing about, is there will be vulnerabilities that are built into these systems that you can't really detect until they run. So it's great that you scan the container, but once you put it in the cluster and it's running, that's when it springs up. And
We have Cody here has some great examples there, and you can gain a lot of information from once a system's up and running, actually seeing in production, measuring how things are working. So it's a great point. We actually see that with our customers today. What we're showing here. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We as a security company, we take security very seriously. We have internal security team that Jim gets to crack the whip on us and say, hey, this stuff's got to be secure. But it is something we take very seriously. I mean, this is available. This is a SaaS, a cloud-based system, so they're able to log in. We do have two-factor authentication for them to be able to access this information. We have a secure vault that we store anything that's sensitive or confidential. We don't store that directly in our database. We store it in a separate vault to keep that secure. So we follow, we have pretty strict policies and procedures on how do we handle our data, because we recognize this, it's very sensitive.
Who at a user company or a partner company is typically the one running the scan? How technically savvy do you need to be in order to do this?
So the question was, who's typically running these scans and how technically savvy do you have to be to run them? We'd like to hope you don't have to be real technically savvy to run them. As you could see, as Josh went through it, it's pretty simple to set up a scan. We ask for very basic information. You don't need a PhD in security to start a scan and to look at the high level results. What I would say in most cases, it is someone with an IT background, with sometimes with security background. that would run a scan. Where I think it's where you need that information is when you drill down and you're looking at, how do I fix this issue? You know, it's one thing to say, here's my score, here's my areas that are weak or strong. But when you drill down and say, okay, I've got this particular vulnerability and I need to do these things, we'll provide a lot of information, but generally you need to know the implications of that. What's going to happen when you do that? How do you perform that scan? This is one reason we work with partners, some of which we have in the room here today, that they can help our customers. They can help their customers implement the security they need. So they can use this tool to identify those issues and help them actually implement fixes.
Any other question? Connie, looked like you had one.
I was just going to give a shameless plug. If you go to travasecurity.com under the resources tab, you can find an ebook that we've put together that's a comprehensive guide to scans. And it gives a detail of all of the scans that Josh mentioned, what they are, why you would run them, how often you would run them, and what you would find out. So that could be a really great free resource for you guys, easy and free to download from our website.
Great. Okay. I'm going to turn it back to Ashley. Up to Jim.
So, you know, I love talking about security. Rob gave me the perfect opening by saying I cracked the whip. When it comes to our internal security, the thing I wanted to add was we take no shortcuts. There are no back doors for us internally. And so a good example of that with the two-factor authentication, when I'm doing a demo for a customer, I take pride in the fact, and I tell them, okay, it'll be just a second while I get the second factor on my phone so I can put our two-factor authentication in. So it's not like even in our demo environment, we have shortcuts. Oh, it's to me. Is this time for a break? Okay, I can handle that ad lib. One more short break, and then we're going to a very exciting customer and partner panel. So Cody's here. Ben Jacobs, who's Vice President of Engineering of Encamp, will be online. We're looking forward to that. You do not want to miss it. They both have great stories to tell. So thanks. Okay, welcome back, everybody. My understanding is we have Ben Jacobs on the line. Ben, are you there?
I am. Hey, Jim.
Wow, it's almost as if you're here. That's awesome. So I thought it would be great to kind of follow up the almost theoretical discussion that we had at the beginning, where we talked about, okay, where do companies find themselves? Why are they stuck? How do they get started? That kind of thing, and talk practically with some examples about how other companies and partners of ours that help companies do that, you know, with some real world examples. And so I think I'd like each of our guests to maybe introduce themselves when I pose my first question to them. And so, Ben, if I could, I'd like to start with you. Maybe start by telling us a little bit about yourself and about Encamp. But my first question to you really goes back to kind of the discussion that we had at the beginning, which is, how do you get started? What's that first step? In other words, what was keeping you up at night and what sort of pushed you over the edge to actually talk to, in this case, Trava in the first place and get you off the mark and get you started on your journey?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So thank you for teeing me up there. As you said, I'm Ben Jacobs. I'm the VP of Engineering at Encamp. We are a software startup with roots in Indianapolis, although now we're fully distributed. And we operate in the environmental compliance space. So we're a platform for businesses to understand and comply with different regulatory burdens that they have in their environmental space. And yeah, to that question of how and why we got started, I joined NCamp at the beginning of 2020, and was working on building out the kind of core product and the technical team, and was doing what I kind of thought was right from a general best practices standpoint in terms of what I thought of as just security at that point. I come more from a development background, not as much from a infosec or security background, and where things really started getting a little spicy was we had even as a very small company, we had landed a large enterprise prospective customer who was asking some very pointed questions about kind of our security posture, and wasn't quite as satisfied with my gut assessment that things were basically okay. So
Trust me.
yeah. So, and they were asking me questions and using acronyms that I had never heard of. So I was, between writing a lot of code, also trying to furiously Google what the heck they were even talking about. And so our initial engagement with Trava was really at a very tactical level. What do we need to get in place in several weeks in order to kind of meet the bare minimum for this client and their requirements, and then make timelines for how we were going to implement on that plan. But once we got over that initial hurdle, it was clear to me that we didn't want to be in that reactive posture anymore, and that it was going to, becoming an expert in all things cybersecurity was probably not the best use of my time, as I was also, trying to do a bunch of other things in terms of building out the engineering organization. So I would say the motivation was to try to, was first, I didn't, at the beginning, I didn't know I had a problem. And then, found out the hard way and had to react quickly. And then after that, knew that this was not a one-off situation. Our customer base was turning more and more upmarket, and we wanted to have both a kind of security posture that we felt good about, but also one that was defensible to these larger customers. And that was, and the only way that was going to happen was to really take a comprehensive, zoomed out view of the program overall. So yeah, that's kind of where we got started, Jim. Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. That was great. And so one quick follow-up question. We described the general situation earlier in answer to the question of why don't companies, be more proactive in pursuing this? And I use the term negative inertia. Do you feel like once you kind of took that first action and overcame that initial negative inertia, that things just became easier or more natural to move forward and progress?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would say, once we as an organization started investing a little bit, it became clear that this was an ongoing need for time and energy, to the point where, about 6 months after we started working with Trava, I was able to get dedicated headcount for kind of infosec needs within the company, and we really, we wanted to commit to that. I would also say that some of it is this is certainly not universally true, but once we started putting some of the groundwork in place, it became more natural to think, know where our blind spots were, and the patterns of thinking about risk, that even if we were kind of unsophisticated at the beginning, we were at least we were now in a territory of like known unknowns, and that's easier to start breaking into an action plan rather than just the big scary dark sea out there. So yeah, that's a long answer to a yes or no question.
No,
but I would say yes.
That's a great answer. And I'm glad you brought up that concept of blind spots, because we'll come back to that. I'd like to turn to Cody now. And Cody, again, first, tell us a little bit about yourself and about AIS. But then in your case, where you are a partner, a service provider, kind of bring it up a level and tell us about your experience with your customers, and how you get engaged with them, why they might talk to you, where they are, how do you help get them unstuck?
Sure, thank you. Cody Rivers, I'm Chief Technology Officer at AIS. We are a cloud security and infrastructure firm here in Indiana, and we support firms globally, mostly Midwest and East Coast, in their kind of cloud design and then the day-to-day management of those environments. And then also their alignment to security frameworks for either internal risk mitigation or regulatory obligation.
There's that word again, regulatory. Yeah. So tell us about, what your typical kind of client getting them off the mark experience is like.
Yeah, so it's great. And I want to mention too, that blue blazer, I almost wore it today. And then I'm walking out and talking to Darcy, and I was like, I should wear the blue blazer today. And then I got here, didn't. I opted for the.
At least you have a picture. You have photo documentation.
Yeah, so I almost wore that today. It was very, very nice. So actually, it's similar to Ben. A lot of our clients come to us because they are good at X, that they're proud of what drives their revenue, and they whether it be cybersecurity requirement, or they're trying to go up market, as mentioned earlier, and companies now requiring tier 2 vendors, and they're looking now at your security posture as a risk to their vendor risk program. And so they'll ask kind of, what is your framework? What do you align to? And then with that comes requirements of, assessments and vulnerabilities. And I say right away with anything, before you go to bed at night, you lock your doors to your house and your windows, but you've got to know how many doors and windows you have. And so this is kind of that first step as far as, what do I have out there? What's vulnerable? And really, without this piece, you really can't be sure that you've locked the doors and done a fundamental security review.
So that's got to be very helpful. And what's interesting is AIS uses the Trava risk assessment and vulnerability assessment platform at a higher level that we actually didn't demonstrate, in that it is a multi-tier, multi-client environment. And so tell us a little bit about how you use the platform and are able to look at multiple clients simultaneously.
Yeah, it's great for us because it's very clean, it's automated, it feeds into our system. But as our job for our clients, as well as they don't really know what they have sometimes. And so we use Trava as a baseline for all of our clients to kind of come in, do a groundwork analysis. So we'll get kind of what they say, what the Trava scans, return, and then from that create a plan of action. And it's been a great partnership. And, even we find some new things, every once in a while, as Rob was mentioning earlier.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's great to hear. So back to Ben, can you walk us through the process a little bit more, maybe, as we went from discovery to implementation and what you learned along the way? I mean, I think it's been 8 months now, and we've certainly made a lot of progress. So sometimes it's difficult to unwind that all, but maybe just go back a little bit and talk about your observations of that whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that came about in this initial work to get us kind of up to snuff for this contract, we worked with you, Jim, and other folks at Trava to get a baseline cyber risk assessment drafted. So that was, right to this quote that you just had about kind of knowing how many doors and windows there are. This showed us a lot about what was going on, and I have to say, as a kind of former engineer and a recovering perfectionist, I didn't really like receiving that first report, because almost every item said, NCAMP doesn't have a very mature posture, and I was like, who the heck are these guys telling us that all of this stuff we worked on so hard is broken? And then once I kind of got over that, I realized one, it was true, and then two, just a part of approaching a good security posture is to just be ruthlessly honest with yourself. So not try to sweep under the rug where the deficiencies are, and instead kind of make that project plan and start ticking away at it. So we actually then rolled right into from that, we started working with Trava to roll into looking at pursuing a SOC 2 attestation. So beyond just getting kind of onesie twosie vendor forms filled out, we were interested in really getting some sort of third party in looking at our posture. And so I'll back that up and just summarize by saying that getting the 30,000 foot view and then arranging that in priority order in terms of what our most vulnerable areas were was a really eye-opening experience, and then just approaching it in a kind of level-headed way where security for us has never been, knock on wood, on fire. We've never had kind of a hostile like agent inside of our system. We haven't had data loss. Hope to never get into those circumstances, but by taking a comprehensive view, we've started seeing where some of the possibilities for failure are, and then are actually in the process of doing an updated annual cyber risk assessment. So I'm hoping that we can go from failure in all categories, at least tick it up a notch and start showing, my colleagues and the board, some movement in the right direction, just across all elements of our posture.
Yeah, I have no doubt. So 2 points. You're absolutely right. Prioritization is key. And I think it's key in preventing yourself from becoming overwhelmed, right?
Yes.
You make a prioritized list, and then in an organized manner, you work your way down that prioritized list. And but the other point I want to make is we never meant any of that personally. That was not meant to be.
I know this is all my own deal, Jim, and you know that.
Okay. All right. I just want to make that clear. Thank you, Ben. So, Cody, how about yourself with the process that you walk your customers through, from discovery to implementation, and where does cyber risk management work in for you in all of that?
So typically, I mean, I would say now it's a first day. Oops. Check.
Yep,
There we go. It's a first day conversation for us, because you'll even see now with the insurance questionnaires. Years ago it was just a, what are you doing? Sounds great, handshake.
Yeah.
They've evolved from that to 5 questions. They're now multiple pages and checks and balances to it. So yeah, they're a lot deeper now. So. And then earlier you mentioned CS for cybersecurity frameworks, and SOC 2 is one of the ones, popular one for software firms, and it's a requirement. It's not a maybe you should do this. This is a fundamental thing. And from what I say, it's low budget, high effective rate. I mean, really on the scale of things, I've seen a lot of tools, and their tool earlier is beautiful. I mean, not all of them, are that they look like airplane cockpits. There's 1,000 levers in them, and you don't know which one does what. But so it's a great start. But again, it's a requirement for virtually any fundamental security program, and then especially for the ones that are regulatory, like a SOC or a CMMC.
Absolutely. So Ben, now that you are a year or so in, I forgot we're about to do your second baseline cyber risk assessment. That's exciting. It's almost like you're at the point where you're now in a position to give advice to business leaders, business owners, other vice presidents of engineering, who may be where you were a year or 18 months ago, and it's like, I'll worry about cybersecurity tomorrow, but today I've got a release to take care of. So, what would you say today, Ben, to a business leader, and I guess in your case, of a SaaS company?
Sure, sure. So, speaking to my own kind of prior experience, especially thinking about communicating with someone in a startup space, I would say it is hard to like it is hard to take it on yourself, and it is impossible to do at the 11th hour. So
Right.
so there's some elements of being a tech entrepreneur or a programmer where you can just pull a couple all-nighters and get some interesting stuff happening. And I think that it is wrong to think about your risk management and your cybersecurity posture in that way, because it is just a fundamentally different type of project. So I have no regrets about calling in outside experts. And then I also think that I have been kind of humbled in terms of like how long things take and how many details there are. Not to say that it drags along, but thinking in months and quarters rather than in days when it comes to putting a really good program together. And then it takes some good maintenance efforts along the way. So I think yes, what I would recommend is don't underestimate it and don't go it alone.
Yeah, that's very good advice. Cody, a slightly different approach, because you don't offer only cybersecurity services. So you've probably engaged businesses doing other types of services, and yet you're probably seeing things. So talk about how you kind of shift the conversation to cybersecurity, how you raise consciousness about cyber risk management. Just walk us through that a little bit.
Sure. So we have clients we have pro sports teams, we have manufacturer clients, we have clients that are SaaS firms that are out of overseas. But as you mentioned earlier, that everyone has someone wants, whether it's client data, whether it's an insurance policy with a high limit of ransomware on there, or in manufacturing, the people with nefarious intent, they know that you have cash on hand. They know that downtime is critical to you. So 2 hours of downtime to you can equate to a lot of loss. And so with us, it's mostly by industry. It's just that everyone has different trigger points.
And there's different assets that they're trying to protect.
Correct. Yeah. And there's a cost for that. And there's a cost to disrupt that, to lock it down, or to, exfiltrate that and then expose that and a bad reputation for someone else. And so it's mostly just kind of learn their business, what you're doing, what are your goals, what are your fears, and then how do we, keep the bad guys out. But again, sounds simple, but it begins with the low hanging fruit.
You're absolutely right. And it goes back to that risk management process that we talked about earlier, right? Identify the assets, identify the threats, the vulnerabilities, then what do you do about it?
Make a plan.
Make a plan, and then execute slowly and surely. Connie, do we have questions? So I'd like our panelists to answer, but I can't help myself, so I'll answer first. 3 examples of cybersecurity tools. So you have a good collection of cybersecurity tools. However, remember what I said. If you remember only one thing from today, what was it? This is a quiz. What was it? Say it with me. A collection of cybersecurity tools does not a cybersecurity program make. There's more to it than that. So what we're missing there is, where are the risks? And I don't know this company. To Cody's point that he just made, you have to know the company, because every company's assets are different. Therefore, every company's risks are different. And so what they really need is to enter the contest that Connie put together, and hopefully they win a free baseline cyber risk assessment, $6,000 value. I'm a pretty good pitch man.
Bam.
$6,000 value from Trava Security, because that's what, all kidding aside, that's what they need. They need a baseline cyber risk assessment to discover and uncover where their cyber risks really are. And then mitigate those in an organized fashion.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's the equivalent of going to Google when you have like, a cough. You're gonna find a lot of bad things can happen, and you can go down some dark holes, and so it's some dark places, and so yeah, what we're saying is it's a very expensive, or it can be a very expensive area. So like to save yourself some headache, some time, some money.
Wasted money.
Yeah, I would agree.
Ben, what do you think about that?
I'm sorry, Jim, I didn't hear the question. Can you repeat it
Well,
for the microphone?
okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I should have repeated it. Sorry. So there was a question that came in, and it said they had, I think, about 3 different tools. They had some antivirus, they had some endpoint detection, and maybe one other thing. And it's like, okay, that they want to move forward from there. What would you suggest?
Yes. So first, I'll plus one what Jim, you and Cody both said, and then I have some anecdotes. So yeah, before you rush out to a solution, it's really important to figure out what kind of gaps you're plugging, what the size and scope of the risk is, depending on your company. As you said, Jim, what type of assets do you have? What's the sensitivity of your information? What are really the points of failure, and what would happen in the case that something occurred at that point of failure? And I know that one of the things that a year ago, when I was going through this kind of pea soup of acronyms and trying to figure out what tools even existed in the cybersecurity space, I ended up being one of these customers or prospective customers that people hate to get, because I was just hopping on the phone with everybody, and I was like, okay, so tell me what your product is, and should I be buying it? And then I would be disqualified because I figured out that I was, like talking to some sort of enterprise solution that only sells 1,000 seats at a time, for an on-prem network. And I'm like, okay, so we're a distributed company with 14 people. I probably shouldn't be trying to buy this, software solution. And that's what can happen if you go out and try to find tools before knowing what you're trying to solve. You end up wasting a lot of people's time and getting frustrated. So yes to all of the kind of do your risk assessment first, and then also I want to say this is a complicated space, but it is not impenetrable. Like, the reasons that we have these programs, the reasons that there are best practices are logical. So there's always the need to use critical thinking and apply it to your individual business case. So there's lots of worksheets, there's lots of things like that. But at the end of the day, different companies are going to have different risk profiles and need to think about the appropriate means for applying solutions to their use case.
Yeah, I would say I totally agree, because I mean, in kind of like summary of those things, these are tactical responses to a strategic initiative, and so there's umpteen thousand different choices, but again, if you don't have the initiative, then the tactical response is
right.
You don't know if you're hitting your target or not.
And I thought that was just a brilliant example. Thanks for bringing it up. And I think you probably hit on a second, maybe more important, key takeaway from this whole day, and that is that no 2 risk profiles are identical. I think it's too easy, to your point about going on Google and finding some list of, here are the 8 tools you should buy to be secure. And it's like, that's probably right for company X, but not company Y, right? And so that's very, very important, is the idea that you can do a do-it-yourself cybersecurity program by, following someone else's example. Even if they did this is an example. Let's say they did it right. They did a risk assessment first, and they ended up with this great solution and these collection tools. There's no way that means that's appropriate for your company.
It's like having the same workout plan as the NBA player for myself. It's not a good fit.
Or me and an NBA player.
I need it customized.
I found a mic, and I have another question that came in. This might be a loaded question and a fun one to answer. What is the biggest security challenge for small business?
Let's let Ben go and then Cody and then I'll go on that one.
And again, I'm knocking on wood here because I don't want to I don't want to enter into this area too much. But we actually, you know, we're a small company and fairly new. And the fact of the matter is, when you're building systems at this point, you get a lot of good things kind of for free. You don't have to invent the wheel every time. So I would say for small business, probably for big businesses as well, but for small businesses, it's getting a basic level of security thinking and paranoia throughout your organization, because, you know, like, I think it is much more likely that you know, in my case, that an employee accidentally, you know, sends something sensitive to the wrong place rather than like Russian hackers break into my system. So I'm more worried about mistakes or people who are just miscalibrated to how to handle sensitive information correctly. So I would say building that culture of thinking about the business's best interest and the customer's best interest, and what types of information are you handling, especially we hire a decent amount of people, environmental specialists who haven't worked in software companies before, and they just need to be trained a little bit in terms of what working with data for Fortune 100 customers looks like. So that'd be what I would say with that.
That's a good answer. What was the exact question, Ann? What's the biggest challenge, Connie?
Oh,
Yes. What is the biggest cybersecurity challenge
Okay,
for
great.
small business?
Okay. Thank you, Ben. Go ahead, Cody.
I'd balance it on two things, and that's like budget and tolerable risk. Because you could spend any amount of money and eliminate risk, but what is a tolerable risk, and the balance of that with cybersecurity insurance? You know, you can only do so much. You can sink your business and go out of business with a very in-depth plan, but now you can't afford to pay your employees. So it's, again, is what is tolerable risk for the company? What is, you know, you're beyond negligence, and then within budget.
And I think I have my biggest challenge is sort of a corollary to what Cody just said, and that's dispelling the myth that cybersecurity is too expensive for the average small business. Going out of business is expensive, all right? And so it's really this awareness, eye-opening experience, education, whatever it is, having that difficult conversation to say, it's not really expensive. Now, obviously, you don't want to spend foolishly, buy things you don't need. You want to do the right things for the right amount of money at the right scale. But I think the biggest challenge is getting over the notion that cybersecurity is somehow optional, and therefore, you know, because we're a small company, we can't afford optional.
I think you said it best earlier when it was like, I'm small, they don't want my things, and you say, well, you have an insurance policy that's got a number on it, and
Yeah.
well,
They'll take your cash.
Yeah, that cash is in the bank, but it's available.
Yeah, if nothing else, they'll take your cash. That's right. Okay, how are we? We at time? Just about? Okay, Ashley has a question, which we'll repeat. Yep. Yeah. Okay, so I'll do my best to repeat the question, and then we'll let Ben and Cody take it. So we hear that cyber risk is really business risk, and there needs to be a conversation about cyber risk at levels outside of the security organization or the IT organization. It seems that Ben and Cody now get this, and so the question is, how has that awareness maybe changed your viewpoint or your customer's viewpoint? Was that pretty good? Okay.
I heard that was a good job. With, as an example, I always say SOC 2 because it's a popular framework, but anyone who's done SOC 2 or been involved realize like it's not just IT, it's HR, it's finance, it's executive, because IT is kind of the medium in which they move, but the actor can be on any side. So your CFO can execute a wire for something. He may have gotten the email via IT, but no IT was required for him to execute a wire or to elicit a transaction. And same with HR and making employee accounts. I know the thing earlier with the Slack channel, or I think that was Rob with the Slack channel and making the user and elevating his privileges. Those aren't IT people typically. So that's why IT is kind of medium. I would say.
Right. Ben, what do you think about the cyber risk management or cyber risk as business risk?
I think I have always approached them as synonymous. So I'm curious where the questioner is coming from. If there's and I'm fortunate enough to have an organization where it's easy to communicate a direct line from cyber risk to the rest of the executive team. So if you're coming from a place where there's more resistance there, I don't know exactly what to say. But yeah, we certainly think of it. Yeah.
Larger organizations where cyber risk is seen as a IT only issue, IT only problem. Exactly.
Yeah.
We talked earlier, not to get off topic, but just to raise awareness a little bit. Cyber risk is only one of about 6 or 7 risks that comprise what's called enterprise risk management. And we're seeing more and more interest at that board level, at the senior management level in this thing called enterprise risk management. Because there's a growing awareness that yes, cyber risk is important, cyber risk is business risk, but there are other key business risks, and collectively all those risks need to be looked at together. So you may want to put a note down about cyber risk versus enterprise risk management. Any final comments from Ben or Cody?
I think he did a great job.
Did you have a question?
Well, the increase in premium. The question was, am I seeing more interest with our clients because of the length and the in-depth of the cybersecurity questionnaires? And absolutely, the questions are more in depth, and so they're just a lot more eyebrows raised. But I think the obvious one is the increase in premiums if those answers aren't in line with what they want to see. So because there's a direct correlation of those questionnaires and your cost. Most of our clients, we want to make you look like the 70-year-old in a Buick and not the teenager in a Mustang, from a so
good analogy.
So yeah, so but like you're saying is if you fill those questionnaires out wrong and say no policy in place, okay, here's your premium. Or if you say yes, we have this policy, and then it'd be like a super fluid program, but some foundational things, and then it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah, the other thing about cyber insurance, which we're going to talk about here shortly, that's changed is there are, I guess you'd call them qualifying questions or pre-qualifying questions. So there's usually like 4 questions having to do with multi-factor authentication, data backup and recovery, and a couple others. And it's like what they're saying is don't even bother to fill out our application if you can't answer these 4 or 5 questions in the affirmative.
Vulnerability scanning.
That was another one. Yeah. If you haven't installed Trava's
vulnerability scanning platform, don't apply. How are we doing? For us at least.
Repeat the question.
Oh yes.
Please. Sorry. Yeah. So the question was to both Cody and Ben, have you seen any trends, noticed any trends as a result of your own cybersecurity posture in terms of ease of which you can close business or generate business? You know, what have your business conversations, how have they changed as a result of your own cyber risk posture?
See, that sounded loud. That sounded good. For us, I would say absolutely it has, but it's also taken away like bias or someone assuming that it's self-serving, right? Because obviously that's what I do. So of course this guy's going to tell me. It's like the AC guy coming to your house saying you need new AC and all this stuff. Of course he's going to say this kind of stuff. But when you have a framework or a list of a recognized national kind of building code, it takes away the assumed self-serving interest of us in the security posture. So we've seen a big increase because of MFA, vulnerability scanning. They're all kind of phishing campaigns because they're direct questions on the questionnaire. There's a response. What tool do I use? What is my tactical response to the strategic initiative? And so for us, it's been an absolute uptick in business.
So Ben, talk about your conversations with potential customers since you've become more comfortable with your cyber risk posture.
Right, right. Well, I mean, and for us, especially being in the kind of business to business SaaS and selling upmarket, this became we've actually, as we've developed a better cyber risk posture, we've also started focusing on a different clientele, and that's been a kind of parallel journey as a company. But to your question, Jim, to be able to speak, convincingly, authentically, and then present evidence backing up that we are following best practices, we have thought about all of these situations, that gets us past the kind of initial hurdles that would otherwise just gatekeep us out of talking to customers. Even if there was a good kind of product fit, we would know that we would just die in procurement. I would say being conversant in these areas gets us a long way, and then having the receipts to back it up seals the deal.
That's great. That's great. And Cody brought up an interesting point that I want to just expand on a little bit. The notion of the self-serving thing in the security industry. And we at Trava took that pretty seriously when we decided kind of where our lines would be, what we would do, what we would partner with others to do. And so it was interesting. I was presenting to an investment group last week in Central Illinois, and I got pressed on this. And the accusation was, all of these antivirus companies, they were actually writing all the viruses in order to sell more antivirus software. And I didn't punch the person out or anything, but I tried to calmly explain that our job is to hold up a mirror. Our job is just to report results. And then we partner with AIS, other partners, et cetera, or the company itself goes ahead and fixes it. So, to Connie's question earlier about, challenges and barriers to get small businesses off the mark, we shouldn't ignore this kind of suspicion out there that there is, like a conflict of interest or whatever. And so we as vendors in this space have to always be aware to steer clear of even a hint of that.
Yeah, and I would add to that. So that's why, all of our clients use Trava. But from that standpoint is because the initiative is I'm trying to go up market into larger enterprise companies. And so they have more mature vendor risk programs. So the first thing they send you is a questionnaire similar to the cybersecurity insurance questionnaire. And if you have the report or your SOC 2, it's a report that's third party audited. I keep saying that word because it's a common framework, but there's NIST or CMMC. Yeah, I mean, those things are kind of like, again, a technical response to those frameworks.
Okay.
I've got two more questions that came in.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So one is to you, Cody. Are your clients or potential customers surprised to find risks in their developed cybersecurity environment? Like, are they surprised? It kind of goes back to what Josh was demonstrating earlier. Like, are they surprised when they see all the red instead of green? And then are they surprised at how quickly that you're able to sort of remedy that and sort of address the most pressing issues?
Yes, I would say 90% of the time they're very surprised. You know, because there's things again that you just scan and don't know that's out there, whether it be you know, an old
Yeah.
file storage on the network that's got some deprecated language on it. That's you know, or SNMP.
Somebody's demo
Yeah,
demo data on a server. Yeah.
someone's
It's
out there.
publicly accessible. Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. And then again, as Josh said earlier, it's cyclical. So like there's always new vulnerabilities. So even if you crush the report and take out all the severity 4 and 5s and get to 3s and 2s, you run it in 6 months and there's brand new ones out there. So it's unfortunately
Never ending.
yeah, it's a cycle, which is why it's so important to scan, you know, in high intervals, because you wait a year, you may have crushed 2020, but now in 2021, you forgot the ones that came out in the middle of the quarter, and you have new vulnerabilities. So they're oftentimes they're also very surprised by how little of I would say budget and effort it is to take out a large portion of the risk, because a lot of the risk is end users, it's vulnerability scanning, that's a big attack surface right there. You can get obviously deep down into code.
Keeping systems patched.
Correct. Yeah, correct. Yeah. So that's
It's not that difficult.
yeah. You can knock out a lot of that red with some very easy mitigation tactics, you know, applied.
And then just a comment, I'll credit Paul with this, that is virtual. He says, as an outsourced cybersecurity company, we find that cybersecurity is so complicated and overwhelming for small businesses, speaking to the biggest challenge. And then he gives us a plug about Trava helps prioritize and simplify the process for them.
Oh, that's very kind.
Paul has
We
seen,
try.
Paul's seen the cockpit. He solved his levers. Trava doesn't-
I mean, that's really our mission at Trava, truthfully. It's to bring comprehensive cyber risk management to small and medium-sized business. And I guess in parentheses, you could say in a easily understandable and affordable way. With the
Absolutely.
help of our partners.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks, everybody. We going to another break, but don't you go leaving now, because we got cyber insurance coming up.
Sit tight.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Jim.
We're gonna head into the most exciting part of the program, cyber insurance. Cody, you're not alone. I too failed to bring my blue blazer. Virtual audience, thank you for hanging with us this afternoon. And I just want to mention one thing. You all have probably all been receiving my numerous emails a week about Cybersecurity Awareness Month that's been running through the month of October. We've kind of tacked ourselves onto the national campaign by running a challenge where we provided you questions and clues on where you can find the answers. There's a total of 8. Number 8 is going to be released tomorrow. Number 8 question. The clue to the answer is going to be found in this segment about cyber insurance. If you have not already signed up for the challenge, you can still do so. And I encourage everybody to do it. I promise you that anything that you have to read to find the answers to the questions, or anything you have to watch or listen to, is found like in the first paragraph or the first couple minutes. We've made it really easy for you to learn and become more aware about cybersecurity and cyber insurance. So it's not going to be a big time investment, even if you haven't been doing the challenge yet. We'll get you caught up on questions and clues, and you have until end of day Monday, November 1st at 7 p.m. Eastern time to submit, so you can still enter. The free baseline cyber risk assessment, the first place prize, I had to lie a little bit for legal purposes about the value. Like Jim said, it is really valued at about $6,000. And that's your chance to win that from the challenge. as well as additional 30 days of the Trava free trial. You can test out all of the things that Josh talked about in his segment. And then third place is a cyber insurance review. If you already have a policy, we'll review it. If you think you need to get one or you're going to get one, we'll help you through that process. So really good prizes. I think it would be worth it, and you're going to learn something along the way as well. So that's that. Join the challenge. There's still time. I'm going to turn it over to Jim.
For fabulous prizes. That's right. Thank you, Connie. Hey, everyone. Thanks for being here. We're just talking about kind of the excitement of the conversation, the level of the conversation, the great questions we're getting. So keep those questions coming in. We're going to shift now to the risk transfer piece of the risk management process that we've been talking about. So remember, it was risk assessment, risk mitigation, and then risk transfer. The mechanism that we have for risk transfer is cyber insurance. And we've heard cyber insurance mentioned in a number of contexts throughout the day today. We have two people joining me up here that I can't imagine two better qualified individuals to have a conversation on this topic. To my immediate left is Ryan Dunn. He's Trava's Director of Insurance. And I'm going to ask each of our guests to introduce themselves a little bit as we get more into the conversation. And to Ryan's left is Charlie Wilmerding. Charlie is founder and CEO of Altus Partners. I'd really like him to tell you a little bit about that. But we're also fortunate enough to be able to count Charlie as a board member. He's a member of the board of directors of Trava. And so that's where a lot of our insurance ingenuity and insurance know-how comes from. I know enough about insurance to be dangerous. Let's just put it that way. However, let's get into cyber insurance here a little bit. I'd like to start with a question. This is audience participation. So how many folks in the audience work for a company that has a cyber insurance policy? Okay. All right, put your hands down. Of those who raised your hands, how many people feel that they have a thorough understanding of what that cyber insurance policy covers?
I should raise my hand, right?
Yeah, we had one person from Trava raise their hand just for those people online that couldn't tell. So that's good. That's understandable. That's in line with our expectations, and that's really why we're here today. It is a complicated topic. We're not here to give you a lecture about cyber insurance. You're not going to leave here as cyber insurance experts. We just want to, I would say, our objective is to kind of take the veil off of cyber insurance, remove some of the mystery, so you just have a better understanding of the dynamics of what's going on right now and why does it seem like it's so crazy. Because I think with a better understanding, you'll be able to make better decisions, better investment decisions. You'll know how to buy the right insurance for you. Just like we talked about before, every company's risk profile is different depending on their situation, depending on the assets that they're trying to protect. The same could be said for cyber insurance. The cyber insurance that's exactly right for one company is not necessarily exactly right for another company. Okay, so with that said, Ryan, let's turn it over to you first. First, take a minute or two to introduce yourself, and then maybe just give us your take on the craziness right now that's going on.
Yeah. Hey guys, Ryan Dunn. I'm actually from Florida, so I'm not used to. This is cold for me, by the way. I think we're at 50 degrees or something like that. That's pretty cold. But I come from a world where we focused on. I was in the agency world where we focused on tech E&O and cyber, and it's wild whenever you're communicating with businesses, and this is ordinary businesses, schools, and you bring up the word cyber insurance, and they immediately turn off. And so I think this is a super important talk to have to kind of uncover, what are the biggest threats to businesses right now? And it's our understanding that the biggest threat is cyber threats. And my take on that is, if this building were, it couldn't operate. Well, we learned with COVID that businesses were operating perfectly fine just without the building. And so, it's just a super important issue that we need to be discussing more.
Charlie, how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself. You have a very interesting story.
I'm not sure it's very interesting, Jim, but first of all, I just want to thank you for recognizing when the cool guys come on stage, you get the cool chairs up here.
Insurance and cool.
Yeah.
Insurance is cool. Bumper sticker.
As Jim mentioned earlier, my name is Charlie Wilmerding, and I am the founder and CEO of Altus Partners. We are based in Philadelphia. We are the only 100% fee compensated broker in the country. So what that means to those of you who are not in the insurance business, as you probably know, agents and brokers are generally compensated by commission. They get paid a percentage of the premium that you pay for the policy that you buy. And with all due respect, and I know we've got some in the crowd and maybe online who are agents and brokers, there are a lot of great people in the business, but there is a fundamental conflict of interest there. Whereas most companies are trying to contain and reduce their risk-related and insurance-related expenses, brokers are only paid however much you're willing to spend, or they are able to sell you. So that's who I am. I'm thrilled to be here. I think with regards to demystifying the world of cyber insurance, I would start by saying it's actually quite simple. There are two fundamental parts to a cyber insurance policy. One is what we would call first party, and the second is third party. When this cyber insurance industry started maybe 10 years ago, started in earnest about 10 years ago, I think there was a big fear and a thought that most of the claims would come on the third party side. And just to better define what first party versus third party means, third party claims are ones that are made by outsiders against you. So let's just say you've got sensitive information on your system is breached, some of that information is released to the public, perhaps posted on the internet, and it's that fear of being sued because of that loss that drove really the formation of the whole cyber insurance business. What's happened, and I'd be curious as to Ryan's take and anyone else's take in the audience, is it's for the time being, at least, it's gone the other way. Most of the claims that are made against cyber policies these days are what are called first party claims. They're claims, basically, it's on your own property. So for example, if there is a breach, the first thing someone needs to figure out is what happened. Who got in there? Can we figure out what they took? Or if it's a ransomware situation, how can we get back into business? It's those costs that are incurred throughout that process, which are all considered first-party costs. And by far today, those are the ones that insurers are paying. So I'll stop there.
Well, and that's certainly what we're hearing most of the headlines around,
Yep,
with all the ransomware payments and that kind of thing. So Ryan, maybe just dig in a little bit to that, with the recent increase in ransomware and the payments and insurance companies pushing back and then readjusting their application. Just kind of unravel all that for us a little bit.
I mean, it's completely true. The first party is the main driver in claims. If you look at the data, ransomware claims are the most volatile. I mean, they're out of this world expensive to remediate. And then on top of that, you have social engineering claims. And that's the most frequent type of claim, right? And for everybody else, social engineering is when you're tricked into sending out funds to an incorrect address. And for example, I've seen ransomware claims where it's a full decision, board on the email,
Mhm.
and the hacker is just sitting in the email in the back. And right when those wire instructions are being sent, he jumps in. So there's 10 people on this email chain. It's almost impossible to check in. And instead of using vendor.com, it's Jim at vendor.co. And he sends out the invoice and boom, money's gone. And good luck getting that back. And so there's a lot of expenses that are associated with that. So absolutely, I mean, first party is huge.
And I really want to highlight that social engineering, sometimes it's called ACH fraud, which I know is slightly different but related. Eh, but I think that really brings focus to the point we were making earlier about you don't have to be this high tech company with terabytes or petabytes of data in some cloud to be a target of a cyber criminal. You can be in, you name the industry, the construction industry, that ends up having to write big checks,
Yeah.
big cash transfers, right? Very little data, no online presence. You just use this SaaS application, that other SaaS application, and bam, huge claim.
It's that's another talk about demystifying. That's another huge thing. And Jim just harped on it. When people think cyber, they think data.
Right, right.
And
Like,
it's
I don't
so
have data. I don't need cyber.
exactly. And it's so much more than that. If anybody would like to comment on this, but you know, how many businesses or software do you guys think you rely on? Right? Does anybody
You mean
have
how
a,
many SaaS applications
yeah,
do we
exactly.
run?
Like like from a number, do we think it's 1, 2? I mean, it's probably 5 plus and
I
30.
Yeah, we have like
I mean,
30 to 50, I think, at Trava, and we don't have that many. It's amazing. So here's a stat for you. There is a high alpha company named Xylo, and what they do is they manage like SaaS companies for companies. They get a handle on how many SaaS licenses do you even know how many licenses you have to which SaaS applications there? So they're a little shim in there. Do you know how many like SaaS vendor applications they track? 20,000. 20,000. And the customers that buy their services, the average number of SaaS vendors that they keep track of, 2,000.
Maybe you guys could chime in on this, but one of the most important covers that I see excluded in cyber policies is bodily injury, right? Now, granted, not mainstream businesses, you might not have that, right? You might not have that threat to your company.
Mhm.
Or, I mean, what do you guys think are the most important covers in a cyber policy?
Well, where I thought you were going to go with that, first of all, let's back up a little bit and explain this. Unlike some other types of insurance, another complication with cyber, there is no standard, across different carriers policy. So there's kind of basic coverage, and then there's what's called endorsement. So options you can buy, right? And so what happens, and this led to my question about, do you understand at a detailed level what you're covered for and what you're not? What happens is people make assumptions about what's covered and then they find they're not. I know you have a good story about that, but one of the typical ones, to Ryan's point, is there's such thing as business interruption insurance. So in other words, first party insurance, you're down for a period of time, all right? It's bad enough that you're trying to recover and everything, but what covers those financial losses from the fact that you couldn't be in business for some period of time? Don't assume that that's covered. Don't assume that that's included.
I think that's right. If I could jump in though and add
Please.
that you know, the cyber market, the insurance market in general is dynamic. And I say that, it's hard for me to say that because it's the insurance industry can be viewed as being so big, slow, backward looking, boring. But the fact of the matter is it is moving all the time. Rates move all the time. Coverages change all the time. And I think I would take a little bit of a slightly different approach than Jim suggested. You're beginning to see, in some ways, some common coverages among all the major carriers, probably more so than ever. But on specific limits and sublimits, you're beginning to see differences in what they are providing. And I would suggest to all of you that you pay particular attention to that now, because I would say cyber market is very dynamic right now. And, you know, for those who know me, they always hear me use this analogy, but the insurance business drives its car through the rear view mirror. There's no way for it to price a risk or an exposure to loss that it doesn't know about or have experience on. And so things like business interruption would be one, reputational risk. These are relatively new things popping up because it never occurred to me, even bodily injury, it never occurred to people 10 years ago that what happens in software could or on the internet could cause such problems. So more than ever, I would say pay careful attention and make your agent or broker explain to you exactly what is, and perhaps more importantly, what is not covered in your policies. Yeah. Yeah, so the issue, the
Repeat the
question was
question,
asked,
Charlie.
yeah,
Go
the
ahead.
question was asked basically around latent threats, and also I think you're talking about reporting provisions of a policy, right? When did you know about certain things that have either, right? Well, let me take a shot at responding to that. Or yeah, is that this is a bigger issue than just in cyber. I think you're finding more and more insurers in general are getting to be really sticklers about these issues of late reporting, and there's history there. I mean, when you look at the environmental risk and you look at asbestos and things like that, these are companies. Many companies have gone out of business because they wrote policies that were loosely worded about when you knew about a claim and when you reported it, and as a result of that, they literally went out of business because of the looseness of their contract wording. Unfortunately, the cyber world is taking it in the teeth right now in terms of this very issue of being very particular in this fast-moving world about what you knew and when. So I think, and it may not be exactly what you're asking, but I would also, with regards to anything that potentially looks like a claim on the tail end, meaning on the back end when you renew a policy, you make sure you are clear with your broker what you know and don't know so that they can at least put your insurer on notice. Doesn't have to turn into a claim, but at least you stuck the stake in the ground saying, I told you about this, so that 2 years later when there's a problem, they knew about it and they can't deny the claim, or they have a harder time denying.
So Charlie, is this at all analogous to like pre-existing conditions in health insurance?
Well, it depends whether or not the question is about on the underwriting side. And so if that's what you are asking, certainly there is more underwriting scrutiny now than ever. And I think because I've got the gray hair, so I can, but I do have
At least
hair,
you have
Jim.
hair.
But I do have hair.
No comment.
But maybe for those of you who have been in the business long enough to know, maybe I'm going to use 10 years ago, insurers made you jump through hoops to even just be considered for cyber insurance, and they charged a lot of money. Don't hold me to this number, but over the last decade, because people were not buying as much of the coverage and there were not losses like the industry thought, they lowered the price significantly, maybe as much as maybe 90% reduction in price from where it was first priced down to where it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And now what happened is they're getting crushed on losses
Yes.
and it's swinging violently back to those same, I heard it referenced before, 200 questions, again, jumping through hoops to even be considered for the coverage.
Mhm.
And pricing is going up anywhere from 20% on the low side on rates to
400%.
300, 400, 500%
Yeah.
with coverage restrictions thrown in.
I remember 5 years ago, cyber insurance for a full policy was like max $400, and it was
Yeah.
a 2-page,
and-
1-page application.
Oh, no, Lloyd's was making it, I think they were among the insurers who were trying to get it down to 3 questions.
Yeah.
Between 3 and 5 questions is what they were trying to get. it down.
Well, to your point, because they were after market share, it was like, if you ask 5 questions and you ask 3 questions, I'm going with this company over here.
Right.
And now it's what, 14 pages?
It can be 14 pages. It's tough. But again, and I don't want to defend insurers where there is no defense in some of their behaviors. But in this case, I think it's understandable because of the pace at which the cyber world is moving. They literally are really trying to price a moving target, and that's not easy. I don't think you should be giving them a break. I think you should be buying coverage. I think at some point, I hope we'll talk a little bit about why what Trava is doing is exciting to someone like me
Yeah.
who's been in the.
That's actually where I wanted to go next.
Sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about where cyber risk management works into this. And again, it's crystal ball, but where do we think how all these pieces could fit together? And again, the analogy that comes to mind for me from and this may be right or wrong, from the health insurance side is, wellness credits. And, if you do this behavior over here, then we'll give you this benefit over here. So is that like where we're trying to go with
Sure.
cyber risk
Sure.
management over here gives you a benefit over there?
Sure. The answer from my perspective is yes. There's nothing new about what Jim is talking about. Risk mitigation, loss control, if you want to call that, loss prevention, has been around forever. And but what's really interesting is how insurers, a few of them, and certainly we at Trava are trying to marry that loss control or loss prevention with the actual policy itself. I told, and I'll try to keep this story very short, but to show you how old this idea of bringing the two together is, when insurance was, the first 2 insurance companies in America were founded by Ben Franklin in Philadelphia, where I'm from. And they were fire insurance companies because back then in the 1700s, there were no such things as public fire companies. What actually happened was insurance companies built and bought fire companies. And they would put, if you bought a policy from them, they'd put a plaque on the wall of your house. And if there was a fire, the fire company would literally show up at your house. They'd look around the house to see if their mark was on it. If it was, they'd fight the fire. If it wasn't, they'd go home. And that was that. I think what we're trying to do at Trava is to basically say from start to finish, if you will work with Trava to assess and then mitigate the cyber loss or exposure, we will present for you to the underwriting community, the insurance companies, a better picture than you would be otherwise. And I think how that translates into reduced premiums or higher limits or lower deductibles has yet to be shown. But
Remains
that's
to be
what
seen.
we're working.
Yeah.
That's what we're working towards.
I have a little bit more aggressive perspective on it. I even think
Because you're the sales guy.
I even think that it's going to get to the point very shortly. I mean, it could even be within 2 years where if you're not working with a company like Trava, you're not getting coverage.
I don't dispute that. I think that,
Yeah.
yep. And I hope everyone's going to be working for Trava. I know it is, you're not alone in that feeling. There are insurers who are trying to build this
Yes.
skill set or talent out internally. They're looking to acquire firms like Trava.
Yes.
It's going to be a very interesting next couple of years.
Yes. Yeah. This is the wave of the future. It's just a matter of who's going to catch the right wave.
Mhm.
Yep.
So guys, a question that has come in and that we get frequently is, yeah, but I work with a company like Trava. I do everything I can to mitigate the risk, to prevent a breach from happening, to prevent a cyber attack. I'm putting these measures in place. It's organized. It's, proactive, not reactive, et cetera, et cetera. I still need insurance?
Fair
Why-
question. Fair
Why?
question.
Why?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't remember what is the saying, your best defense is only as good as is today's best offense. So in other words, the reason you need it is because, again, it's that idea that we all know what ransomware is. And I think that Rob and his team could probably tell you how most people or bad actors get in and cause ransomware acts. But that's not to say that's going to be the same way things are done in a year from now, say. And so the insurance, which is, by the way, just to put it in perspective, insurance is nothing more than a hedge or a financial safety net. So I think the reason why Trava is so exciting from a concept standpoint is that all the work that's gone up concludes really with, all right, now I just need to make sure that if there's just anything that goes wrong, I need that $1 million, $2 million, $5 million financial safety net
Mhm.
if things go wrong.
Yep.
Ryan, why don't you answer next and then I'll go.
I think it loops back to
Yes.
back to what we were talking about earlier about systems we rely on outside of our control. I mean, for an example, does anybody know why the Colonial Pipeline, or is familiar with why the Colonial Pipeline crashed and why people couldn't sell gas through it? Anybody know? A lot of people, well, even if you go on Wikipedia, it literally says the operational software shut down the pipeline, which is
Ransomware,
not
yeah.
the case. I mean, what a surprise. Wikipedia is incorrect in its information, but it was an attack on their billing system that they don't control. So, it's whether you're, there's certain things that Trava can protect you against, but the things that are outside of your control, you need to be insuring and transferring that risk outside.
Yeah, and I think it's a great question, Connie. And the way I would answer it, two phrases come to mind. One we talked about before, which was blind spots. One of our objectives at Trava is to uncover as many blind spots as possible, shed light on the blind spots. Where do we not, it's like the known knowns, the unknown knowns, but the problem is the unknown unknowns. That's what we're talking about. And the other way to describe it is, we use insurance as a hedge, as Charlie said, against risk. What kind of risks are we talking about with cyber insurance if we've done everything possible to build up a cyber insurance program? To build up a cybersecurity program. Talking about unforeseen risks. That's really why you have cyber insurance.
So another question we're sometimes asked, which is how much is the right amount of cyber insurance? And I'll throw it out there that there is no answer for that. I think everyone should have it because every business has a significant exposure to cyber loss. But ultimately, and especially in this market today where the pricing is going up so
high.
quickly,
Yeah.
it's a question of how much you feel you can afford. it's kind of like buying umbrella coverage. I mean, there is no right answer as to how much is the right amount, but I think you look at how much you can afford. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I was just going to blurt it out there.
It's okay.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah.
And
Everybody should have some,
yeah, absolutely.
and they don't now.
And
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say absolutely everyone should have some, but I can't help but jump in also because this afternoon we've had a lot of conversation about assessing risk and mitigating risk. Certainly in the property and casualty insurance business, I feel that the word mitigation often bleeds into the feeling of avoiding risk. Somehow you minimize and avoid risk, and we ought to all remember where there's risk, there's always opportunity, and every great business is built upon taking risk.
Chances.
Absolutely. And what I think Trava offers and what this demystifying of cyber insurance, really one of the takeaways I hope you have is it's just one more tool to help you take informed risk to accomplish the great things that your businesses are accomplishing or hope to accomplish.
I wish I wrote that down.
Yeah.
I'm glad we have it recorded because that was
Connie, can you
brilliant.
snip that out?
Whatever you just said, that was
not.
brilliant.
It's not. How about any other questions?
Oh, Connie's.
Connie.
Oh,
Connie's-
there was a question that came in earlier. Hold on, sorry, guys. I was frantically writing the notes.
That's okay.
What?
Ho-
Go ahead.
Where do you feel there is room for improvement in the cyber insurance industry?
Ooh, there's a lot
Yeah.
of improvement. I mean, look, we just took an informal poll, probably, I don't know, 12 people. By the way, those who are online don't know it, but for this session alone, the insurance session, standing room only, the place is packed.
we had to lock the
You
doors.
had to lock the doors. Anyway, if there were 10 or 12 people who raised their hands saying they had the coverage,
Yeah.
I think none of them said they really understood the coverage. And that's been a problem. That's been something that plagues the insurance business in so many ways. And cyber is just one more example where it could be better if brokers and agents, I would first of all be leery buying your cyber insurance directly online ever.
Yep.
It's not like auto insurance. Auto insurance is easy to understand. Everyone basically understands it. Cyber isn't even close. It's so much more nuanced and complicated. So I would lean on brokers and agents whom you trust to go get you the coverage. And then I would lean on them to communicate in lay people's terms what the coverage is all about.
Yep.
What would you?
Yeah. That's spot on 100%. I would highly suggest that. And another point of just the insurance industry in whole, some people don't like insurance or they hate
Like
their insurance.
most people?
Yeah.
don't like it.
Most people, 99%.
Yeah.
And it's because they don't understand what they're buying. And so they file a claim, it's not covered, and
Yeah.
now we got an issue. So
And then their whole family gets a bad taste in their
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Charlie, earlier you were talking about how the insurance industry is so dynamic and ever changing. So you take that and then you take the fact that it's hard to understand. So how often should a company review their policy? And is it 100% up to their insurance agent to really have to be kind of a step ahead and really explain how their policy should change? Is it like an annual thing? And is that often enough? Because that's typically how.
Yeah, I would say it's a great question, Connie. I would say that my gut says it depends on how big your company is and what the exposures are that you're facing. So I would think at the very least, on an annual basis, you have a thorough review with your agent or broker on, again, not only what is covered, but as or more importantly is what is not covered. Again, and this shows my colors in my rainbow about kind of what we're trying to do on our side of the insurance business, which is to eliminate commission and the conflict of interest that goes with it. Most insurance people are salespeople, and they're good at it. And salespeople take all kinds of tacks to get you to buy the coverage. Some try to scare them, some do other things, but however they get there, when someone says, well, so what did I buy here? They tend to just tell you all the good things, which is you've got first party, you've got third party, don't you worry, you've got ransomware. Well, do I have the full limit ransomware, or do I only have $250,000 of ransomware? And what's my deductible? And under what conditions should I report a claim? And all these other things that really are critical if you're going to buy the coverage and
Transparency.
oh my gosh. Yeah.
And
Would you
100%. I always tell people insurance carriers give you all your coverage in the first 10 pages and then they take it away in the rest of the 140. So
right. That's right. Well, you really are. You're too young to be that cynical.
That well informed.
Yeah.
That jaded.
No. Yeah. Yeah, actually, it's a great question. Those who are online or in here who didn't hear the question, it's about, basically, if I could paraphrase it, how is the cyber insurance world going to become? You never want it to become commoditized like auto insurance, but how will pricing become more consistent? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. But the good news is we are in the information age. Where we are on the information age in terms of how long it will go, my guess is we're just at the beginning. But with that comes all kinds of data, which will help us better price this consistently. Look, no one loves, insurers don't, believe it or not, insurers don't love it. Certainly buyers don't love it when the pricing is just bouncing all over the place.
Yeah.
People would love it if it was just steady and stable and understand that costs go up, so the premiums go up. But right now, it's a little bit of the wild, wild west. There is some stuff happening. Like I'm not an IT expert, but I don't even know when was ransomware really? When did that happen? Like 5, 6, 7 years ago that it was ever
First started.
first
Yep.
started.
Yep.
And now it's commonplace.
Yep.
And
There's
to
a whole
Jim-
economy around it.
Right. And to Jim's story earlier, analogy earlier of using a jewelry store as an example of risk and what's been done with armed guards and all kinds of other things to mitigate risk. My hope is for the buyers and for all businesses that someday we will have in place technology and other ways to control potential losses in the cyber world. Right now, it's frightening how not only the frequency of losses, but the potential severity. It becomes a national security issue at some point,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. So even though we are just at the beginning of it, that's really is what Trava's vision is all about, is to be that data-driven cyber insurance
Right,
company
right.
with real data.
And I think, I don't mean to speak for the founder and CEO, but but I will, to be a company that can use that data, use its technology to better cloak its clients with protection that along with insurance. I think one last thing.
Comprehensive cyber risk management.
There we go.
Love it.
Right,
Nice, Ashley.
right. Yeah. Right. Want me to take a shot at that one?
Go ahead, you can
Yeah.
go first. I've got some.
So I think this is exactly what we were talking. That's a great question. And until we have enough data, until the industry has enough data to know whether that SaaS company that's serving small, medium-sized companies is a better risk, has a better risk profile than that company that's serving Fortune 100s or Fortune 50 companies, it's only then will the pricing begin to rationalize, right? Because right now, you could say, oh, we think there are going to be losses there because they're serving 1 million customers, which would make sense, right? You have a 1 million chances of something going wrong. There may be another argument to say, yeah, but they're all so small. There's no way if we carry $1 million deductible, if we're that SaaS company, or $5 million deductible, that there's ever going to be a single cyber breach or cyber problem at any of those small companies. On the other hand, you might say, well, if I'm serving the Fortune 50, don't they have all those protocols in place? So this shouldn't be a big deal. And the answer is there just isn't the data yet to figure that out. Well, that's another way of a great way of putting it is the liability has not yet been proven.
So I have a practical example to that question. We had a customer, weren't able to help them, and you'll understand why. They had about $1 million in revenue, a software services company. They had a big potential customer, big potential client contract. That customer wanted them to have $10 million in cyber liability. Yeah, you're shaking your head. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They wanted them to have $10 million in cyber liability coverage. We go to our carriers, our underwriters, they say, well, how much revenue do they have? About 1 million next year. And they want $10 million of coverage. Not going to happen.
Yeah, I would just add to that. That's a great sort of one other tidbit I would throw out for those of you who are buying or involved in the purchase of cyber insurance. And to Jim's point, there are only really 3 reasons why anyone ever buys insurance. One is because they are legally required to carry it in certain cases, workers' compensation, automobile liability in all states. You need the coverage. The second is because you're contractually obligated. And the third is because you've built up an asset and the insurance, the transfer of risk is attractive enough that you want to take it. But come back to the second one, because the caution I would throw out to you is many of the companies you're doing business with also would not have raised their hands if you said, do you understand what cyber liability insurance is about? Cyber insurance is about. And so they say they're box checkers and they say, we need you to get $10 million of cyber insurance. And you're like, I'm not doing that because it's way too expensive, or I'm a company that only has $1 million in revenue and there's no way they'll give me that coverage. Some companies will not budge on that.
Yep.
And you ought to have a broker or someone who can jump in with you, talk that client down and say, you don't need me to get 10. You only need me to get 1 or 2. And here's why.
Yeah, grabbing a broker and having them explain that to the client that's requesting that is huge. Limit requests are a massive thing that agents need to be providing value on. So if you're having that issue, where you're only making $1 million, or you're not even profitable, and you're getting a $10 million limit request from a large client, call your agent. And if you don't feel like your agent can do that for you or doesn't have the relationships to give you that limit, then we have some preferred agencies that we work with.
Yeah, you want to find one that you can trust, because there are plenty of agents in that scenario say, I need $10 million of coverage, who go, yeah, here we go. We're going to get more commission, more premiums going to be paid. But you had a question. Yeah. So for everyone else, I didn't pay him for that question. I promise you, I did not pay him for that question. But let me repeat it. The question basically is, how many insurers should you expect your broker to go out and get quotes from on renewal? Let me first of all say that I think right now, I would say that there are a lot of carriers who are in this coverage, which is in this line of business, in the insurance business, which is good. There's competition out there, right? I would say for most companies, there might be at least 12 really reputable, highly financially rated companies who could write small and large companies. Now, they all have their individual appetites and depending on certain things, but that actual number of total companies might be closer to 20 or 30. I would just say there are 12 name brand carriers you should do it. When you've got your broker on a commission basis, even if they go out and they go bid the 12, what is driving them to drive their price down? Nothing, right? So if you are big enough, even if you aren't, I would suggest you at least float the idea by that broker whom you might otherwise like and trust to go out and do that exercise, and you will pay him or her, the firm, a flat fee in doing that. You watch what happens. Once you free up that broker, they will go to those 10 or 12, and now they're not in the game. So they will pound on the underwriter to get the pricing down. It's the only way it works. That was my only shameless plug for
No,
Altus Partners,
well-deserved.
www.altuspartners.com.
Okay, I thank you so much.
Yeah.
I had no idea well, actually I did, knowing the two of you, that we could make this exciting. So thank you very, very much. And so that's a wrap on this section. We have a few minutes if there's any remaining questions on anything at all. And if not, we can head outside in the beautiful Indiana weather, except for those of you online. And yeah, any final comments? We can pass mics around or whatever the case may be.
Wow.
Good.
And I would be remiss if I didn't thank all the people that were involved in pulling off this event. It's not something that happens quickly or easily. Special thank you to Connie and Ashley for our fantastic Yeah, so let's give them a round of applause. Absolutely. So thank you so much. And a recording of the entire seminar will be available. I know we got some feedbacks that some of the folks online tuned in late, missed my awesome keynote. So yeah, you definitely want to.
That's all right. They got for the best part was the last part,
Yeah.
the insurance session. So that's good. Anyway, thanks,
That's-
thanks, Jim. For
Thanks,
Thanks, Jim.
everybody.
Thanks, guys.